Welcome to this roundtable entitled EU Partnerships, Organizational Costs and Benefits. I'm Maribel Perez. I'm Assistant Professor at ESCA School of Management, and I conduct research on organization management. I'm glad to moderate this roundtable where we'll discuss organizational costs and benefits of EU partnerships. EU partnerships are a very particular kind of partnerships. They have different strategies, they have different objectives, they have different standards. But in the end, for anyone who's interested in speaking about partnerships, we're speaking about grants that are, in a way, they are comparable with many grants from international organizations, grants from governments, whether they are national, regional, or local, and many foundations and firms who also provide grants. They have many of the technical issues and many of the standards to follow that also are required for EU grants. So in that sense, I think it is even though we focus mostly on European Union partnerships, there are many aspects that are related to other kinds of partnerships. So these partnerships are actually very well-meaning enterprises for knowledge and transfer. They follow social, scientific, and administrative standards, and that's part of the issues that raise these kind of partnerships, because when you have to follow so many standards and so many objectives at the same time, um, it's inevitable to have a trade-off. So the point of this conversation today is to speak about these trade-offs from the many different perspectives that we have in this roundtable and the many different institutions that we have. We have a great panel today. I'm going to very briefly introduce them in alphabetical order of last names. We start with Dani Lazi, who's head of research at the Kosovo Center for Security Studies in Pristina. Then we have Javier Riperez Canales, who's head of research on projects at the Euro-Arab Foundation. Euro-Arab Foundation for Higher Studies in Granada, Spain. Then we have Esther Sabatino, who is research analyst for the Defense and Military Analysis Program at the International Institute for Strategic Studies office in Berlin. And we have Fabian Sumek, who is chief executive since October 2013 of the European Policy Center. Just to give you a very quick order of magnitude of the partnerships that we're speaking here today, all these four institutions represented here today, the ECP, FUNDIA, IISS, and KCSS, have been partners of 11 Horizon 2020 programs, which are directed to research. The main objective is to do research on policy innovation. They are engaged in these 11 partnerships that amount to 35 million euros. And these consortia have been part of between 13 partners, in the case of Pave and the case of Engage, or 26 partners in the case of Perceptions, which is also an ongoing project. But this is just the part that these four institutions are doing in terms of H2020 programs. They are also engaged in other 10 programs related to EU grants for SURF, ISF, or Just Consortia. So as you can see, these are very knowledgeable. This is a very knowledgeable panel on EU grants. Now, before we start, I just want to remind everyone who is in the audience, do not forget to share your comments or your questions. I'll be trying to trace all of them and answer as soon as we can all your questions and all your comments. Of course, the panelists are invited to add any comments or any questions during the session today. And before we start with some questions, I would like, please, to ask each one of the panelists, will you describe in 2 minutes, very, very quickly, what are the most important partnerships you are working in these days? May we start alphabetically with Dani Lazi. Microphone.
Your
Yes,
microphone.
excellent.
Thank you, Maribel, and it's a pleasure to be with distinguished colleagues in this panel today, and I want to thank you for inviting me. So as the Kosovar Center for Security Studies is a well-established think tank in Kosovo looking at security related issues. As you know, our region of Balkans in Southeast Europe has a range of challenges stemming from the conflict we had in the 90s, but also more recent challenges. So our focus as a think tank is trying to better understand the drivers of vulnerability, but both resilience in terms of community and society moving towards a more sustainable peace. The project I personally am working on in partnership is the Pave Project, which is a project, Horizon 2020 project, that is coordinated by Berghoff in Germany. And I think my colleague Javier is also part, yes, we work together there. It's 13 international partners. And we are tackling drivers of community vulnerability and resilience towards radicalization. Our think tank is coordinating the research on thematic area on online and offline radicalization and de-radicalization in MENA region and the Balkans. And it has been, we are in the last year of the project. It's a 3-year project costing 3 million euros. And it has been an amazing partnership so far. We have been able to learn so much from each other. And the project was designed in a way that at the start, we had all the partners come out with ideas on how they can improve and develop their capacities to implement the project, both in terms of organizational aspects and also in terms of the missing capacities or know-how on research methodology and techniques. So it has really been a very good experience so far, and we are looking forward to the concluding conference. I think it will be in November in Brussels, where we bring all the research together. And to conclude from my end, what has been very good about this project so far is that all the research that are being done in these 2 different regions, one in Europe, the other in the MENA region, is that we have made all our efforts to try to find common denominators and bring synthesize the analysis, synthesize the findings from these research, so that both partners coming from different areas with different areas of specialities or expertise can learn and grow as well in their expertise and know and understanding of these issues. Thank you. I hope I managed to cover your question here.
I'm sure you did. It was very good. Thank you. Javier, would you please tell us a little bit in 1-2 minutes the projects or one of the main projects you're involved in nowadays?
Thanks, Maribel, and this is my pleasure to be here with all of you today. Well, we from the Euro-Arab Foundation, we are also a foundation, a think tank in the part of research, and we are a foundation owned by or presided by the Spanish Ministry of Universities, with a board of trustees further composed by the regional government of Andalusia and the university here in Granada, with which we also actively collaborate. And our main specialty is to work in the fields of cooperation, training, and research in the geographical area of the Europe and the Arab world, especially in the MENA region, is where within the let's say Arab world we work more actively, but also in the Gulf area and other regions. So in the part of the projects, our goal or our aim is to combine research with training and intervention activities, because for us it is important, like not only the let's say the scientific knowledge, but try to produce a social good, social value. So that's why we combine, and we have two main research areas that are also our intervention areas. One is societies, human rights, cultural diversity, and migrations. And the other one is the research and the intervention on violent radicalization, prevention, and all forms of security. So within these two fields, we currently have several projects, but highlighting something specifically, you already mentioned, Pave Project, in which the Kosovo Center for Security Studies is our partner, of course, but also Perception that Maribel mentioned, in which we try to better understand and create solutions to the problems related with migration, approaching the perceptions of Europe that migrants have before coming, during the migration process, and when arriving to Europe. So this is one project. Pave is part of the area of the violent extremism side of our department, and Perception is part of the migrations. We analyze other phenomena like hate speech, hate crime, religious diversity, toleration, peace, many others. But those two are quite important because are very long project with many different partners, different backgrounds, good funding, and well structured to produce interesting impact and outcomes. So that's all from my side. I hope I wasn't too long.
It was perfect. Thank you. Now I would like to ask Esther, tell me about your work in your projects.
Yes, thank you, Maribel. First, just a few words on the IISS, which is a think tank. We have 5 different offices around the world. So the partnership side, of course, is very relevant, and we collaborate in different projects with different partners. In my case, I am working in the Engage project, that is envisioning a new governance architecture for a global Europe. The project sees the participation of 13 partners. There are think tanks, universities inside and beyond Europe. We also have the participation of one Turkish partner. And the IISS is leading the work on the common security and defense policy of the European Union. We are trying to evaluate CSDP and defense cooperation in general, to then provide some recommendations to the policymakers. In fact, the final output of the project will be a working paper with recommendations not only on security and defense, which is just one work package inside the project, but also on other relevant aspects of the external action of the European Union, so common foreign security policy, partnerships in general terms, and other aspects of involvement of the EU with third actors. The project started last year, will continue throughout the next one. And in the performance of the work, we are working together with other 5 institutions. So my work is mainly focused with the other 5 partners, but of course the cooperation and coordination with the remaining ones is one part that is particularly relevant in the performance of the day-to-day work. I'll stop here, Maribel.
Well, that's an important point on how the partnership works. You know that we concentrate on close part of the network, but then it's a really big network. Fabian, please, in 1-2 minutes, could you describe the work of the EPC with your partnerships?
Yes, thanks very much, and thanks for inviting me. I'll answer your question in a slightly roundabout way, but starting with saying that the EPC is a generalist EU policy think tank. So we cover a very large range of different policy areas. And that also means we have a lot of different projects running at the same time, where we are partners in Horizon projects, for example, but also in many other projects. I think these are very important also because they are part of our diversified funding. But what I wanted to highlight really is that there's a big difference in my mind between the project funding we're getting for particular activities and the more long-term partnerships, the more operational funding. Nothing is purely operational funding now, but certainly there are some funding streams which are more operational. And for me, this is important that we have that kind of balance. So if you're asking me in terms of what kind of projects are most important, then when I look at European funded projects, it is one where we do have, through the Europe for Citizenship program, the think tank funding program, where we have an operational grant, which is running for 4 years. And that enables us to also do some longer term work. It is not quite as strictly tight as some of the operational projects. And that's, I think, an important component of overall funding. In general terms, I think this is, we try to have diversified funding, try to have the different funding sources, but we are also aware of the drawbacks which come with particular projects, and I'm sure we come back to that in the discussion as well.
Thank you, Fabian. Yes, absolutely. That actually opens our discussion today, because one thing that I wanted to ask you, if it is possible, is to keep in mind that comparative perspective between what it means to be part of a EU grant or partnership and what it means compared to other kinds of contracts that you have, other kinds of projects, and the standards that you have to follow and all the requirements. So if you can discuss these issues in a comparative way, actually it's fantastic. It's a really good idea, and definitely this idea of what actually is funded, what it means, the short-term funding and the long-term funding for your organizations, and personally for your professional career, whether you are a researcher, whether you are head of projects, whether you are the chief operation officers of an organization, right? So just remind the audience, you can ask questions anytime or intervene. There was a comment by Dan Schwartz. Hello from Berlin. Could you provide us, please, with the links to your organization's website? Will be super. And already Javier and Dan and Esther have done it. Great, thank you. So let's start with the first question. My first question is for Fabian. The experts are usually the most visible part of these partnerships. When we go into the websites of these partnerships, the first phase that we see is usually the researcher, the expert. But behind that expert, there is a lot of operational work. There is legal support that is necessary. There is financial support that is necessary, and many other aspects of human resources and so on. So these aspects, has been said, are crucial for an expert willingness in the future or disposition to engage in other partnerships. When they have good support in these elements, they engage in further partnerships, at least in further EU partnerships. When they don't, they are very reluctant. So how would you say is the weight of these two aspects inside the EPC? How do they play a role in your decisions to engage and support your experts in going further in other EU partnerships?
Yeah, I think that highlights a very crucial point in terms of the consideration, not only of running projects, but actually whether you engage with them in the first place. We are very reluctant to enter into projects if we are unsure about how exactly the management of those projects is going to function, because we know that European projects are very, very difficult to run. And there's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of also at times nonsensical activity which has to be done. You have to tick the boxes. And that very often, in my experience, is underestimated also in the project application process. Normally, when I look at our project applications, my usual mantra is to say, what about time purely for project management, purely for the financial management, purely for the monitoring and evaluation? Because experiences, it costs an enormous amount of time. And that is even for projects where we are only a partner, where we're not the lead partner. And we are very reluctant to be the lead partner in these, because we see that as something where it really is about investing into the capacity of being able to run these. And in our experience, it's often only academic institutions which really have the full capability, which have people who are full-time dedicated to doing this part of the job. And I think this is also for us a consideration where we often decide not to be part of applications, where we just don't see that the effort in terms of administration, in terms of also the outcomes which we get out of that project, are worth investing that much into it. So for me, this is often about being able to also know the partners you're going in with, being able to trust them, being able also to make a realistic assessment of how likely are you going to be to win it, because a lot of these are very competitive, and investing a lot in the application process. If you then in the end are not going to be awarded the project, is also an organizational cost, which has to be taken into account. And all of that, but we can come back to that in the discussion, I think also has to be seen in the context of, in the end, what is it we want to achieve as a think tank? And do these projects help us to achieve that mission we have? Or can they sometimes also hinder us? And particularly, I think, sometimes because of funding pressures, which I fully understand. I think we all understand them, but I sometimes see that projects are being committed to, which in the end are not helpful to the overall objectives of the organization, which also can carry a very significant risk.
Yes, I find that that this is a really good overview from the perspective of a think tank. It is wonderful what you're highlighting. You know, is there is a tendency to believe we found partners for your grant. They invited us, and people get completely crazy because sometimes there are issues related to reputation, to networking, the need of funding, and so on, that people get excited about it, institutions get excited about it. But in the end, there is an important cost. How does it fit? You try to give the kind of the big perspective. Let's not forget the institutional perspective. What is it that we want to achieve? What's the mission? Are we really going to achieve this through this project? So it's like, you know, we calm the steam of the moment of, yeah, we got an invitation to be part of it. It is true. Absolutely. I agree with that. So now, if there are no comments or anything, no comments yet or no questions yet, I would like to continue with Danny Lassie. Part of your work at the partnership you're working now in Pave is to collect data and to do field work. So this requires hiring and training staff. Um, so on the one hand, we have the expertise that is needed to do this kind of job. On the other part, we have the operational part of it. How are the decisions to train and to hire staff uh, managed at KCSS in this case? It is your decision. It is you who decide absolutely everything, and you need to develop specific skills to hire and train people in this subject, or is it something that KCSS has developed specific kind of knowledge to do it? Tell me a little bit more about this.
It's a very good point you raise in the overall debate about knowledge management in organizations, right? That it's a challenge. Many, especially think tanks, because you're producing a lot of information and knowledge, but managing it, making sure that there is, there is access to it, is distributed and disseminated properly. It's a challenge, but there is in KCSS a knowledge management component to our work. In this particular context of the project Pave, for example, one of the issues that merged the managerial aspect and the research is that you're dealing with divided, often community societies. So if you're going into the field work to research a question that can be a topic that can be sensitive, at one hand, you have obligations to hire very qualified staff. On the other hand, sending people to do research in these areas that are not from these areas can often lead to a higher concerns or consequences. So this is the dilemma, for example, we've been dealing with. And one of the ways we have approached this is creating a local partnerships. For example, in case of Kosovo, we have a particular region of the country in the north that it's more sensitive. There's a more particularities to have in mind approaching this region. So if let's say an Albanian from Pristina is going to the north of Kosovo that is predominantly Serb, asking questions about ethnopolitical radicalization, it won't be perhaps received well. So the way we approach this is finding a local organization that has the credibility, has as well the experience, and partner with them to do the field work together. And then us as an organization provided the overall guidance in terms of methodology, ethics of research, and so forth, to make sure that these are all properly observed. And us as a think tank, on the other hand, had a very good cooperation and framework of Pave with Berkhof in Germany, and also Trinity College in Ireland, who is part of the consortium and was more responsible on ethics, research ethics component of our project. So it required more of this cooperation, but in our sense, in our approach, instead of opening a call, receiving, we went with this local partnership in order to make sure that, your work doesn't do more harm than good. But there are those plans.
What I find interesting in what you're saying, first, well, Fabian was already speaking about the importance of knowing the partners and trusting the partners and knowing that they are good managers. You are adding another layer into this, which is beyond the partnership that we have inside the EU grant, there are local partnerships that we need to create, and we need also to, create good partnerships with them, because the performance of our part inside the partnership depends on those little local partnerships that we have. And so it's an additional layer of management that I see appearing here. And what I find interesting is that still you have to transmit the methodology, as you said, methodology and the ethics of the work that has to be done in the field. So I imagine that you as a researcher, it is very hard to deal with all these issues, because you have to do the research, you have to train the people, you have to follow that the work is done correctly. So it is a lot of operational work that goes inside your own work as a researcher. It's not only what I explained before, that the separation between the researcher And the operational part that Fabian explained before in terms of legal issues, financial issues, and so on, is you yourself as an expert, you are split in these two parts.
Yeah. In our organization, we have a person who's in charge of operations, but as Fabian mentioned, but also as you highlighted, this separation in practice, it's not often that clear, because the researcher has to do this. For example, in this case, I was the contact point of the partner organization and the person they engaged to do the research at the local level. And sometimes some of these issues are technical, managerial nature. And then, of course, a support system is very important for researchers. But yes, this dual hat, researcher and dealing with operations and management, it's very much present, yes, in practice.
Very good, thank you. My next question, if there are no other comments or anything to highlight, my next question is to Esther. Let's move into...
Can I maybe just add one sentence?
Yes, please.
I just wanted to say, I think, not talking about anyone on this call or specifically, but I think it's also very often that analysts are not necessarily very good project managers. And they often are not interested in being good project managers because they don't see that as their main role. And I think that when it comes to these kind of projects, is very dangerous because they are very complex to manage. And you do need also that professional level of managing them to be able to be successful. But I think that's a tension which a lot of organizations have, because in the end, analysts didn't go into think tanks because they want to manage projects. They want to do the research, they want to do the analysis. But the reality is that is often a big part of our job.
Certainly, I agree with you. They are analysts. They want to be identified as analysts. That means that their work is related to the research part of it and not the management part of it. They want to be recognized by the analysis that they do, the publications they do, and so on. And certainly, even I work for a research institution, and as a researcher, we feel that we're very demanded on the operational part of our work. And as you said, we usually we're not good managers. Absolutely. And also we're reluctant to take that kind of role because it is certainly very, very demanding, extremely demanding. And that also highlights this tension of wanting to be part of these partnerships because of the reputational part that it has, how it improves also our CVs, let's say, or professional careers. That's the point of it, improve our professional careers. But we find that we're drawn into the operational part of it. So I agree, and it's very good to point out that we don't always do good managers, the researchers. Very good. So I wanted to move with Esther to the question of inside the partnership and the negotiations in the partnership. And this is a very peculiar kind of negotiation because we are negotiating basically the content. In the case of your the project for Engage, your work package particularly, you're conducting a research to assess the current structures and current policies in specific domain, which is defense policy. So in this partnerships, the criteria that you have to apply to do this assessment, they have to be negotiated between all the partners. Each partner has a specific expertise and they want to develop that expertise. So they want to present that criteria. So the criteria is negotiated. How would you say are the trade-offs of these negotiations in terms of producing a good criteria, a good evaluation, and so on? How would you describe that, please?
Yes. Well, actually, this is something that is also related to what we were just discussing. So the capacity of the analyst, of the researcher to be part of a team and to manage the job that they do, and also to manage all the operational costs. I think that first of all, what is important is to have a very good definition and negotiations at the very beginning of the project, in the sense that when the proposal is written, also the knowledge of the partners' expertise and preferences of research topics should be taken into account when defining the content, the general content of the work packages. Otherwise, of course, there is a tension that is difficult to solve or to deal with. In the specific case of the work package IISS has the lead on in Engage, we are trying to assess the common security and defense policy and the cooperation in defense that is not included in the CSDP, so cooperation at the industrial level, and so on and so forth. So the range of topics to be included in the work package are particularly wide, and we are now in the process of completing the delineation of a set of assessment criteria to then evaluate this policy field. What I believe is important is that assessment criteria particularly, but this applies to any kind of research, needs to be objective, comprehensive, rigorous enough, and to be applied also in different moments, in different times, and possibly also after the evaluation is performed. So that might be useful tools also for other people that are outside the project. In the specific case of the negotiations of the criteria, I believe there are three main parts. The first part is to try to have a conversation with the partners that are involved in the specific task to understand what should be included in the analysis. But then the central part of this process involves the involvement of external actors, of other experts that are inside the consortium, of experts that are outside the consortium, policymakers, stakeholders, practitioners. And this is particularly relevant because, of course, the group of the person that are working on the specific task might have a specific understanding of the task, but not necessarily is the most complete one, or do not necessarily cover the main topics that should be included, particularly when developing assessment criteria. So this of course, I think the added value of this process is that it gives a complementary perspective of the topic that is dealt with. And then, of course, there is the final part that is the actual selection and delineation of the assessment criteria. And in here, the most important part is the capacity to communicate with partners, to evaluate what, in the most objective way as possible, what is important to be included in the assessment. The trade-offs in this, I believe that probably the part that involves external actors, let's say in a general term, takes time and requires resources, and sometimes this is a considerable amount of time and resources that need to be spent in this, but it incredibly improves the final outcome of the research. And from a researcher point of view, probably there needs to be also a certain characteristic, let's say, that is a kind of flexibility in recognizing also that some of the initial thoughts probably were not that fitting the outcome or the objective of the research. In terms of partnership, however, this negotiation process might lead, I believe, to an outcome that might slightly differ in a greater way to what was the original intended outcome. And I believe that sometimes this is related to the fact that that projects are very ambitious, and probably time and resources available are not that enough to conduct to come up, particularly probably time constraints, to come up with a project that perfectly fulfill the perfectly outlines what was intended to be performed. But in the negotiation procedure, I believe that as a think tanker, but also working together with universities, the involvement of external experts it's particularly important and provides a real added value then to the result of the analysis.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree. This idea of time constraints is very recurrent in this partnerships, all kinds of partnerships, particularly this one. Important time constraints. You have to fill deadlines, and you have to meet deadlines, and there is no way around it. So how do you include, as you were saying, particularly external stakeholders into these issues? I like very much your reflection how you achieve these negotiations, how you develop these criteria, and also the qualities that the experts have to have in order to do a good job. This idea of flexibility of the expert and ears open to all these external stakeholders to include this inside the criteria. The two levels that you mentioned as well. What is essential for each one of the partners to see, what are the elements in common, and what is also important, what is essential in this criteria for other stakeholders. Yeah, wonderful. And that makes me move to Javier Perez. A question for Javier, because so far we have been speaking about, especially with Esther and Dan, we have been speaking about projects that are very concentrated on research and on policy innovation. But in the case of Undea, you have been working with projects of different nature. Many on research and policy making, but many others in training and in transfer as well. So are there any advantages of participating in one kind of partnership, for instance, for research, to also participate in other or be part or partner of other kinds of partnerships for training and transfer?
Thank you, Maribel. Well, for us, it's all advantage, and the reason or the key aspect, which is very particular in our case, is that we come to research from a previous preliminary background. From years of work in activities, more others in training and transfer. So we had develop a work building these local partnerships, working with many different stakeholders, because these are our two areas, the two I mentioned at the very beginning. But we work geographically, so we had prior to enter deep into research by ourselves, we had the opportunity to get this kind of networks, contact with stakeholders, with partners, and the capacity to develop intervention, transfer, training. So we had also the knowledge on the different social aspects, on the social dynamics, social needs that were useful for research. So in our vision, we started to develop ourselves in research with this two-way, let's say, pathway or whatever. Where we see two sides which are connected. We have the capacity to bring something to research, so let's create research, and we have the capacity to bring back again the research to the society. And for the consortiums where we work, I mean, this is not only useful for us and within our vision, our mission, our goals, but also for the partnerships where we work. Because we are able to participate in different parts, in different work packages, even move during the project if something moves. This has been important in the last years with the COVID-19 situation, where we have added new roles unexpected when we design the projects. So it's, I think our view is quite useful for the partnerships, but also has, of course, the same costs and the same, let's say, not disadvantages, but cost challenges that have been already mentioned from all our colleagues in the roundtable. This requires from, especially, and Esther mentioned at the end, but also the others, we have developed a lot of internal flexibility. But the way in which we did at the beginning is important, because I think it's easier move from the social action and the training and intervention to the research than on the opposite. So that was important for us to succeed on this process. And later on, this flexibility creates between us something that is very important, I think, when working in the partnerships. That is the trust that we internally apply, recognizing that trust is like mutually created. So we work from this inside, and we transmit this also in our work in the partnership. So you create trust and trust in the others, but you, of course, assume responsibilities and try to develop a good work in order to build the others' trust in you. And this is very important, because you know, when you work in a partnership, everything cannot be as you prefer, or in the way that you think is the most efficient, the most rigorous, because everyone has something to contribute. So when you get this kind of trustful working experience, the project is much more rich, because really is when it takes the different points of view and creates a new point to develop a more rigorous rigor, a most efficient efficiency, So I think those are the keys I can bring from our experience.
Thank you, Javier. Yes, this is basically what. Yes, please, Esther.
Yes, and probably also an aspect that Javier in a way already highlighted, but the thing that peer pressure also plays a very important role, not only trust, but also the fact that you are involved in this partnership with colleagues, and you just want to provide a good research or a good analysis. And of course, the peer pressure, I think, also plays a role in building this trust and in augmenting also the quality of the final work.
in the sense peer pressure, like we are all in the same boat and we have to row together and we have to get this to the end together, and no matter what, we have to go through it. And that sounds positive and negative at the same side. Yeah, I like the way Javier balances this trade-offs, or the way you put these trade-offs. You know how you say that all this is negotiated. It's inevitable that all this is negotiated at many different levels. You highlight two things. Yes.
No, one point to this that Esther was mentioning, which is completely true, is that is the point in which when you build a partnership, a consortium with a dynamic of trust, the peer pressure is different than the peer pressure when the consortium is built on a dynamic of let's see what this partner is doing. Let's see. I don't know if the quality will be good. So building this trust from the very beginning makes that peer pressure is good for the project. But on the opposite, if you don't build it at the very beginning, it makes this other bad pressure that you were meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, to my knowledge, the trust building inside the partnerships is a fundamental element for partnership success. It has been described by participants in many different partnerships that the point of trust is fundamental to carry the partnership till the end, and also to develop further partnerships in the future. So absolutely, this idea of trust and reliability of the partners, to build that is fundamental. And of course, it has an effect on the peer pressure in a positive way. Let's say. What is interesting in this case of Fundia and what Javier is describing is that the path has been different. The path has been from an organization that has lots of expertise at the local level, good partnerships at the local level, which Dan was speaking about, and all that knowledge in the part of training and transfer, how they have moved it into partnerships of research, how they provide this expertise into partnerships of research. Usually the path when it comes to these EU grants, particularly those who start with H2020, is to go the other way around, to actually concentrate on the analysis part, on the policy making part. Well, I have just one very last question, if you wouldn't mind to answer it. We have just 1 minute for each one of your answers, which is, did you find that through EU partnerships, it's easier to kind of pinpoint or to trace policy impacts than through other kinds of projects you have been involved? Who would like to answer first? Fabian, from your for your comparative perspective.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk a bit about impact in 1 minute. But yeah, I think we have been rather critical of being part of some of these projects because what we often see is that the focus is not on impact, that the focus is on research, it's on publications, it's on processes, it's on making ticking the boxes which are necessary. I think we particularly see that when the world around us changes, that sometimes these kind of longer term projects cannot adapt to the way the world has changed. So the discussions then take place in a bubble. And that's why we always try, when it comes to these kind of projects, we don't see them as something which is separate from our core part of what we're doing, but that it's actually, we only enter in these projects if we see that they are a component of essentially what we want to do anyway. So that is something where it also requires a bit of internal discipline, because there's also the temptation of, yes, let's enter into as many projects as possible. Also, there's the financial consideration, which clearly is an important part as well. But I think there has to be a very clear understanding of what can be done with these projects, how they fit in with what the organization wants to do, and then also what it will require to deliver them. And just to answer also Enrique's comment, I think it would be great if funders would also be more aware of these kind of considerations. But my experience is they're not, which is why I was also emphasizing how important it is to have the other aspects of funding, the operational funding, the organizational funding, because that's very often what enables us to do the right things on building partnerships, on communication, on professional management, on all of these things. We couldn't do it without the operational funding, because in my experience, it's never taken into account in these specific projects.
Thank you, Fabian. Thank you for this wrap up. Very good. Well, time's up. I really want to thank you all. I think the take-home message from this roundtable today is what Fabian was saying. We need to show a little bit more what's the operational cost of these partnerships. That not only is one phase of an analyst, is the whole team. It has multiple layers inside and outside the partnerships, and we have to bring this to light. Enrique Mendizabal is in the chat emphasizing that, and Stephanie Nicole as well. You know, we have to show that this is a teamwork, that there are tasks that are very operational. They have to be shown. They have to be very clear in all these contracts that we create with the partnerships. There are many issues we haven't had the time to discuss in this roundtable about trade-offs of the European Union partnerships. I hope we have the opportunity to talk a little bit more about them in the future. We have missed tendering versus success rates, creating a network of partners, the cost of audits, the peer reviews on tight schedules, time and time. We spoke a little bit about this. Well, to end, I just want to thank Dani Lassi, Esther Sabatino, Fabian Zulek, and Javier Ripers for being here and having this very nice conversation. Thank you all in the audience for being here, for joining us in this roundtable. Please remember there are more exciting topics in the conference today and tomorrow. So please enjoy the conference. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Soon. Thank you.